Shalom, I'm Nama Ru,
I'm Rabbi David Ru.
and we are going deeper into the laws of Shmita for Jews living in the Holy Land, growing food during the 7th year of the 7-year cycle, or for that matter, any produce grown by Jews from Israel during this time. So we're looking at the Rabbinic prohibitions because we have to conduct ourselves differently the way that we farm.
Yes. So continuing with the Chaznish's list, the Mishnah in Shvis, Perek Beis, Mishnah Hay, says, Sachin es apagim, umnakvin osam ad Rosh Hashanah. We do סיכה, anointing the pagim, hold on for that word for a minute, and we pierce them until Rosh Hashanah, meaning on Shmita you can't do it, but before Shmita you can. So pagim is a word that occurs in Tanakh, in Shir Hashirim. It says, Hata'ina chotna pagaha, that the fig is, its early buds are doing, meaning it's something that's premature, not ready yet. A pagya in modern Hebrew is a preemie's baby word. So what these are is pretty clear. In terms of סיכה, the Mברטנורא says, and the Rambam says almost the same thing, סכין es הפגים, פירוש שלא נגמר בשולן, fruit that has not ripened, סכין also בשמן, you anoint them with oil, כשהן מחוברים לאילן, when they're still on the tree, למהר בשולן, so that you speed the rate at which they ripen.
Oil?
Oil, apparently they put oil on fruit on trees. The Rambam says the same thing.
I assume it would be like a vegetable oil
or probably olive oil. That was the most common oil that they had, really. So, menakvin, you put holes in them. This time I'll read the Rambam, although in my sources I've got both for you if you want to look at it. The Rambam in this Paris Mishnayos says, menakvin osan, shosim behem nekavim, make holes in them. V'kach derech te'enim shel ketzas mekamos etzleinu. And this is the way of some of the figs around us, meaning in Egypt at his time. She'enim mitbashlin ad shesachin kisem, nakvin so ketzas kol gargir ehen. So they don't ripen until you anoint them, until you take a something like a toothpick and make holes in them. That was their way of getting these things to ripen. Those are what these two malachas are. I do not believe people do this anymore. Now, at this point, I want to look at 3 more malachos, but they're out of order in the Chaznish's list. In the Chaznish's list, there are numbers 23 to 25. The reason why I don't want to do them now is because they're in the next Mishnah in Shvis. All right? Whereas the next ones in the Chaznish's list are actually mentioned in the Nigmar and ottan. So we're going to do these, and then we're going to go back and look at the ones that we learned from the Nigmar and ottan. So our Mishnah says, Ein notnin, you cannot take a seedling and plant it in the ground. Vein mavrichin, and you can't do havracha, and we'll see what this means. Vein markivin, erev shvis, and you can't do harkava. Again, we'll see what this means. The harkava is actually simple, so I'll just translate. It's grafting. Erev shvis. Pachos mishloshim yom lifnei Rosh Hashanah, for less than 30 days before Shana. Vimnata or hivrich or hirkiv. But if you did any one of these 3 things, yakor, you have to uproot it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kol harkava she'enu koletes l'shlosh yamim, shuv einu koletes. Anytime you graft something, if it doesn't take within the first 3 days, it's not going to take at all. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Omrim, l'shtei Shabbosos. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say 2 weeks. So you either have to do it 3 days before Rosh Hashanah, or 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, or perhaps even earlier. You have to have 45 days plus this amount of time. We discussed this in the previous video. If you're interested in it, look there. I just wanted to give you a brief reminder of it since it's in our Mishnah. So, Natiya is not clear in terms of taking the seedling and planting it in the ground. It's not clear that this is a rabbinic prohibition. When we learned about Zoreya planting, many Rishonim, particularly the Rosh Mishans, said that that's a Torah prohibition. Rabbeinu Tam, and most opinions in the Rambam, although not the Chazon Ish's understanding of the Rambam, said that it's a rabbinic prohibition. So whether this is a Torah prohibition or a rabbinic prohibition is not completely clear, but it's taking a small seedling and putting it in the ground. Something that is commonly done with trees. We grow them in a protected area, protected way, until they take sprout and grow and so on.
So transplanting.
Yeah. It's not taking the seed of the tree and putting it in the ground and starting it to grow. It's once I've got a little bit of the tree. Now, mavrichin is different. And there is a slight difference in understanding between the Mברtnora and the Rambam in this. The Mברtnora says mavrichin, kofafin zmuras gefen ba'aretz. I bend the vine of the grape underground, umachasin oso ba'afar, and I cover it with dirt. In this way, it will develop roots there, and eventually I can cut it off and it can become an independent plant. The Rambam says it very slightly differently, but the difference is significant. Umavrichin, hu shemashkivin es ilan l'orko ba'adama. I bend any tree down in its length into the ground, umachzirin alav zafar, and I cover it with dirt. V'yitzmechu mimenu elanos rabim. In this way, I can grow many trees. So, according to the Mברtnora, this is only a prohibition with grapevines, and according to the Rambam, it's a prohibition with any tree.
During the Shmita year.
During the Shmita year, and it might not even be with trees. It might be you might be prohibited to do it with. We have strawberries growing in our front yard, and if I would intentionally do it, what do you call the crawlers that they put out? That's what you call it, I think.
Spindles.
Spindles.
I don't know. I can't think of the word.
Anyway, some plants propagate themselves this way, but it's also possible to propagate a plant in this way, but doing so on Shmita is prohibited. Markiving is, again, relatively simple. The Mברtnora and the Rambam say essentially the same thing. I'll read the Rambam because he says one thing that's interesting. Hu notin shepud begufa ilan. This is, I take a sprout of another tree and insert it into this tree. V'hamon korin lepulazu altalkim. And this is called, in the local dialect of Arabic, the Rambam said altakim, which if you look in the dictionary, this is grafting. And it's the grafting that we use today. Now, the Mברtnora says that I put it on another tree of the same type. And that's because of the problem of kilaim. They can't graft different trees onto each other. However, for those that are familiar with esrogim, one of the big problems of esrogim is esrog tree really only lives 20 years. It doesn't produce fruit for the first 5. So you get 15 years of production, then it dies. Or not really dies, but it stops producing any significant number of fruit. So you have to cut down and start over again. So esrog production is a quarter of the time your land isn't producing what it should be. So it's, however, if I graft an esrog onto a lemon, it can live for several hundred years, productive years. Now, esrogim are grown commercially for the pectin in it. When you make jam, the pectin in the fruit is what solidifies it. Traditionally, you never boil the fruit when you're making a jam or a preserve or any of these things, because that destroys the pectin and then it won't solidify. Now today, for health reasons, we always want to bring them to a boil. We want to pasteurize them. And then what happens is people then add pectin. And the fruit that has the highest level of pectin in it is esrogim. So esrogim are a fruit that is grown commercially for the pectin. And I believe there is I've been there, in Valencia, California, there is a massive esrog grove.
Esrog.
Yes. Larger than all of them in Israel combined. And they have one corner of it where they grow pure esrogim to graft onto the lemon roots that they bring in when they have to do this. And it used to be, Rabbi Shoit Zitzal told me, that in the old days, before imports in the 40s and 50s, they used to drive up there And they would say, oh, you can take the large ones. We don't care. But they only wanted the small ones that are the normal ones that people take, that they would take from this one section where they didn't graft them. But the grafted esrog is not kosher because the lemon and the esrog aren't exactly the same species. So you're not allowed to do that kind of thing. So it's not, you can't make a brach over it. But this is a concern for that. And this is a prohibited activity on the Shmita year.
So like an etrog grown that was grafted onto a lemon tree, you can't use it for religious reasons.
You can't use it for the arbor meaning. You could eat it. You could do all sorts of other things with it. You just can't use it for the 4 species on sikkahs.
Okay.
All right. Next time we'll be looking at some of the malachos that we learned from Moed Cotton.
Happy Shmita!